it's more than 5 here too, so.
I read early today where
It's working here.
Lake Placid's starting to get a lot of COVID now.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Of course,
go with the
a
report.
lot of people go to visit.
Thank you.
Tourists
Thank you.
coming in.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So we're not live, but we're recording it.
I think the governor,
Sorry.
the governor's trying to be a nice guy, but not shutting anything down, but probably needs to do it. Well, my guess is he'll wait till after Christmas.
Yeah.
I know they showed the map on the nightly news last night. They were showing like last month, or 2 months ago, last month, and this month. The whole map is red. The whole thing. It's amazing how much of an outbreak we're in.
Yeah. Scary.
So we're gonna start now. I guess we are, we're being recorded, but it's not live streaming, is that right? Shalice? We're being recorded.
That's right, we're not live streaming, but we're recording.
Okay. Today's Wednesday, December 9th. It is 4:15. Roll call, Emily here. Shalice?
Here?
Art?
Here,
Jeff?
Here,
Michael?
Here.
And James.
Here.
And I would like to motion to table items 1 and 2 from the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
second it.
yes, okay, thank you. And so I will, I need to leave, for personal reasons. I had initially was going to have, Carol, do that, but, Mr. Moore has agreed, to chair for me. So I'm going to move that a little bit because there are a couple of things that we need to discuss, with me being present. One of the items is, scheduling meetings. I thought it'd be a good idea to schedule the meetings 2 months in advance so there's no issue with communication and the media. I'd like to keep it at the every 2 weeks because I think that does work for us. Does that sound like a good idea for everybody, or do they have, an alternative?
Perfect.
Okay,
Every 2 weeks.
okay, every 2 weeks until, the middle of February, because we're on the 9th today, so I think that works. So for the next 2 months, so that schedule is set for them, they know, we know. So I guess we're clear on that, right?
Of course, the first one, today's the 9th, 16 more days will bring us to,
The 23rd will be our next meeting. Does
Okay.
anybody have any issue with
14
not being
and
able to attend on the 23rd?
23rd.
It's fine.
Okay, that's fine, okay. And then Kai left, we're sorry to see him go, we wish him the best. However, that does leave an opening for another opening for a landlord. I'm not sure how the panel wants to go about finding somebody. I mean, is that something that we should do, or is it something that we bring up to the common council? I'm not really sure how that works. Okay, so I guess we'll look into that, and then in our next meeting, discuss what is the policy. We also needed to replace Bob too, but I think we were okay with just keeping our circle the way that it is, right? Because I think that we were okay with the limited meetings. We also need to discuss about the transition to Zoom. And that wasn't something that I had put on the agenda, but that was something that was, previously spoken about because of, the uptick in the numbers of the virus in our community, and it not being, for future meetings, not a good thing for us to come in and meet in person. Right now, I guess we can, but I don't know how long that's gonna last for, so that it's not so abrupt having the Zoom meetings. Mr. Kelly said that he would look into if into that, because I'm not really sure how that program works. And I don't know how to like invite people or, anything, but Mr. Kelly, you did say you
Yeah.
would,
The
okay.
city has an account, so we can use the city's account and set up the meetings in advance. And all you have to do at that point is just send emails to the members to remind them of the upcoming meetings. It's not very hard to do it all.
Okay,
And it could possibly mean we could attract some more members by,
yeah,
if people can come in remotely rather than attending in person, we may be able to pick up a few additional members, which would be nice.
okay, perfect.
Okay.
Are we planning on using Zoom for our next meeting on the 23rd?
I don't see why not.
Okay,
Hey,
so yeah, so next
As,
week.
as Emily stated, you know, she wants to do is go out like 4 meetings or 2 months. So we'll go ahead and set those up. It's a recurring meeting, so it's very, very easy to do.
Okay,
Be happy to do it.
okay, and then, I wanted to also mention, I think it'd be important to discuss, an attendance policy, because there is, concern, that in the event I were to actually have an emergency, the person who would do that for me is not present, usually. And, I think that we all put good effort into coming here, and I think that sometimes our personal lives, interfere with, things that we feel that we stated we were obligated to. I'm trying to be very polite as I say this, but I think that there should be something in place with that, just something to think about, not something to, set in stone today. Because I've been thinking about that and exactly how do I address that as the chair myself. How do I address an issue like that? Because I feel it's very sensitive of a topic. So, and I'm not really sure how to deal with that. I did mention that to Mr. Kelly before along those lines about, what should I do in the event, there's an incident like that and it's, reoccurring. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see. So that was just something I wanted to bring up. Is that everything that I needed to cover? Okay. I feel like I rushed it.
It's
Okay.
fine.
And then, I think that's pretty much it. I did put on the agenda that you guys can have continued discussion. However, I will say very briefly that I know at our last meeting that we were talking about potentially having Ms. Glenn to come in and I think that at this time, I think it would offset the balance that we're currently having. But I would love for you to come and be a guest speaker because I think that you really do have insight that we don't have.
Yeah, if I may, I have every intention of attending every meeting that I can, and whatever, even if it's just to watch and to participate however I can. Just again to highlight from what I said before, if I'm not formally on the committee, which is fine, that does just limit some of the testimony that I can give. But yeah, I'm happy to serve in that capacity. It's fine.
Okay, and what do you guys think? Do you think that's, I don't know, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Moore, what do you think? You think that's?
Yeah, just to bring up, you had made some motions earlier, we didn't vote on them.
Okay.
We could vote on them in aggregate if you want, but
Okay, yeah, well,
you just
So
need the aye or nay to, because we had to have more meetings and,
Items 1 and 2, I need to table just because we don't have the minutes for either of them. The first one was the regular minutes, and the second one was the amendment of minutes that Mr. Kelly had to make adjustments on.
I think Mr. Kelly motioned to table it,
Yeah.
and Mr. Gregory made the second. I think we just need a formal vote.
yes, there you go.
Is that what it is? Okay, all right, see, all right. Okay, so how do we do that?
So just a roll call.
Okay, all right, so Emily, yes. Shalice?
Yes.
Art?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes,
Mike?
Yeah.
James?
Yes.
Okay. I guess carried. Okay. I think I'm allowed, or me. Is there anything else that,
Old business.
yeah, old business, so,
I have something I'd like to say, I mean.
okay.
On December 13th, 2019, last year, almost a year ago, landlord law P6 was passed. It's supposed to go into effect in April. There has to be a fee set. April's going to come pretty fast. Is that in our domain to be working on that, to come up with some kind of a fee schedule? Or is that left to the council?
that's left to the council, and we put that back on the front burner because we need to get that established now. Because you're right, it is creeping up on us, and we want to have that all in place well before April 1st.
That registry, in my mind, is so important. I was talking to James earlier this afternoon and gave him a couple of examples. One is at 24 Clinton Street, which is common knowledge that there was a drug bust there. And I looked to see if I could find the owner of that building, and I couldn't come up with that. And then there's another place, the former bed and breakfast, and those people have been gone, own that place. But I could find that property, it's a real property approach, and they're still listed as the owner. James is going to find out if that's still the case. But again, that emphasizes how important that registry is, so that the building inspector's office knows where these people are.
I know that Clinton County, has a, like a property, like website. You can look up a person's name, or you can look up an address and, locate the property owner. I actually had to use that for, or suggested we use that for our job to find, places we were supposed to visit. Not so much their name, just locations. And so that doesn't apply to the city then? That only applies to people who have
No, I
property?
can find my own place in the city, I can find neighbors, I can find other places, but there are some, they're not all accounted for.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
Art's correct, there are gaps in that database.
Yes.
Because I've tried to look up who owns this building, and it just will not come up. You try the name, you try the address, try all these things, and there's significant amount of gaps.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do this so I can see the gap. Am I blocking your view? Good, great. Thank you.
that's
So
interesting.
you're right, Art, that should, maybe this will help clear it up, that we'll know
More.
who owns what. But they should be in the tax rolls, because every property that's on the tax rolls, you should be able to research it. It should be in there, it should be in the database.
Yeah, but if it's a LLC, then if you don't know who it is, then you haven't really gained any information.
Oh,
And
that's true.
that's the case a lot of the time.
But how do you eventually find out?
Well, those types of instances really just slows things down, because instead of picking up the phone and giving somebody a call. You have to send correspondence, and it just takes a little bit longer.
But eventually you can find the owner, correct?
Typically, I mean, we deal with this stuff so often that you kind of have clues about, you know, who might own a certain property, you know, what maintenance crew you see there and stuff like that. There's little things that we can pick up on. So, you know, for people that we deal with regularly, it's not as much of an issue, but sometimes, you know, the complaints and whatever other issues that we deal with tend to come from the same places or owners. It's not that often that there would just be a standalone property that we don't know who it is, or we've never dealt with them before. That's less common. It does happen, but it's less common. But yeah, it is difficult to try to figure out who the owner is and get the ball rolling on those properties for sure.
When I was in the town, the code office there also had a similar issue, trying to locate owners. Usually the property owner was not that it was an LLC, it would have a local PO box with mailing address. And it would take sometimes a couple months to try to figure out who the owner was. And then sometimes they would end up having to serve orders to remedy with sheriffs involved. And eventually it would fall on the tenant who would eventually be able to name who their landlord was. And that included commercial tenants as well. It was not just household, it was actually more often it was businesses, but it did happen to residential units. But unfortunately, I don't think there's any database existing currently, which definitively gives you a good contact.
Yeah, that's one of the supreme benefits of this registration is that everyone's gonna have a contact registered. Everyone's gonna have their maintenance guy or whomever is responsible for the property, especially if they don't live around here. Even if they live in Saranac or
Montreal.
a little bit
like
further away,
Lakeside.
Montreal, yeah. There's plenty of absentee landlords that don't live that far away.
There are plenty
But
too. live
it's
in
still far
different-
enough away that,
There are a lot of live in Vermont and other states as well.
yes. A lot of the people that own property that live in Vermont are here every day, though. There's a few guys that own a lot of property that are from Vermont, and they're make it their business to be here every day, so they're not the most difficult to track down.
Mr. Moore, do you mind to take over?
Actually, before you leave, maybe I just wanted to say one thing, speaking to what you said before about attendance and not having a right there, it's your table when you're unable to say. Perhaps maybe collectively we can appoint an interim vice chair, until maybe we build up our membership and get the replacement for the landlord. Are we replacing that or not?
I thought we decided at one of the meetings that we weren't going to add any more members. I don't know if you guys remember that discussion. We were just okay with who we had on the panel. But other than that, we do need to have a balance of landlords. Like, for example, today, we have no landlords here. Kai's gone, Carol was unable to make it. So it really does offset the balance of the tenant-landlord committee if we don't have the input from landlords. It's just really, it's not fair, right? So with respect to that,
My only concern is we have two tenants.
I think that it would be in the best interest of the spirit of this committee to have two, if we're gonna be ramping up conversations about the registry, and it's gonna be, beginning in April. I know that you guys have had a lot of direct conversation with that other committee to try and keep everybody happy, right? So, I mean, that's,
I agree, with two tenants, I think we should have two landlords,
yeah,
sorry.
I mean, it's just better than having an issue that they could have addressed ahead of time,
What do? Do you advertise to get a couple of landlords to get on this committee?
Well, hopefully we would get one from, they have an association, and it's quite large. But I think somebody from that group should be here because they must meet together and talk about these things. So it would be good to have somebody that has some insight into that group.
And Kai might be able to offer up a suggestion.
Yeah.
I think he was kind of spearheading that committee, if I'm not mistaken.
So should we recommend that maybe the mayor's office solicit some nominations?
say yes on that, because I mean, I can't say that I personally know of anybody who's really a landlord. I mean, I'm sure I know somebody who's a landlord, but I probably don't know that they are, right? So, it would just make it, more open to the public, for people to, I guess, come in and say, you know, hey, I'd like to come on board maybe. I don't know, just make it open where, you know, we're asking, you know, landlords. I mean, at this time, we only need one landlord, but,
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. Our current vice chair has attended, I believe, one meeting since we were established in March.
That's
Or
correct.
February. I really think it might be time to seek out two landlords and replace that member. Who are not maybe that's going to be there for 99% of the meetings. That respectfully, you know, respecting everyone's desire to have served on this committee, but also the inability to continue inability to serve.
Exactly,
I mean, she's certainly welcome to, you know,
Yeah,
contribute
of
in
course.
any way.
I would absolutely invite that, any contribution that they have, but they've been unable to attend or deliberate or, I know, unfortunately, our last meeting, which I felt was incredibly productive, we had the testimony during that meeting, it was unfortunately due to a technological error not able to be streamed. And without having attended that meeting, I don't know that, you know, the members that were absent that aren't committed to being here are going to be able to weigh in on what occurred.
right, and that's a real concern, right, because, and, you know, had, like Carol been here today, a lot of the stuff that we had discussed and moving forward, she would have to abstain from. Because so much has been discussed and so much time has passed that it, you know, it's hard. It's like getting a new member, right? Having to, catch that person up to speed, with everything that you've covered and where you are right now. And sometimes that's difficult, to do. I mean, it's not impossible, but it is difficult, especially with, you know, a lot of the great discussions we've had about, you know, what our city needs.
Councilors Moore and Kelly, perhaps you can weigh in, I believe there's something in the charter about, I know it's referring, I believe, to council members in particular, but something about missing a certain number of meetings. Is there resignation or?
Yeah, that probably wouldn't apply in this situation, but I agree with you 100%. I mean, I look around the room and I see the same people. Everyone has got very good attendance here. We want people that will participate. If you have people that aren't showing up, and then, you know, you have to go back and try to explain what happened at the last three meetings. I mean, you know, we're free to do as we need. If, you know, somebody isn't showing up, we could replace them. I don't need necessarily have to replace them, but have somebody else that will show up. I mean, it's a great group. This is great attendance from the people I see here. We all pretty much show up. And it kind of speaks to that, you know, you want people that are going to participate. You can have, you know, 20 people in a group, and I agree with you 100%. If we don't have people that are going to show up, then they aren't going to participate, they aren't going to contribute, and, you know, then people afterwards say, well, how come you did this or that or why? It's like, well, you know, these are the people that came.
Exactly.
So should we seek out two landlords, two replacement landlords for the committee at this time? Or request the mayor's office to solicit that?
So I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to do that. Like, do I have to, like, do I send a letter to Carol and let her know that, you know, she hasn't been here? I don't know how to address that. And I don't wanna make this into a liability issue and violate, you know, parliament procedures or anything like that. I've never had to do anything like this.
To be honest, I don't know that it's this committee's place. I think it would come through the mayor's office. So I think-
Would it? I mean, I don't,
Yeah, I don't think we need to delve too deeply into that. I mean, if
Okay.
at some point we need a different, you know, vice chair or whatever, we can just do that. But But I don't think it's something we need to delve in. And I can, speak to the mayor about, or Mike can, to reach out to Kai Ford. I thought he was a good person to
I like
have.
Kai.
Yeah, well, so, see if there's somebody else out there that he could recommend, he can call them up and see if there's somebody that they would like to bring forward, and then we could bring it here and see if we want to do that, but I think that would be a good idea, because like I said, that association covers a whole lot of landlords. And if somebody that's active in that would be great to be able to come here and tell us what they're thinking.
Okay, so we'll, you guys, can, I guess, talk to the mayor and see what he says with that, and then when we come back on December 23rd, we should have more of a definitive answer on what that looks like. So,
You've given us a deadline,
oh,
the 23rd.
yes, okay,
You got it.
all right, well, times and dates are good, aren't they?
Yep.
All right, so we're all on the same page here.
Yeah.
Thank you, I don't know if you're on, I just wanted to do that while you were talking.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think we're clear on that. I just need to, I guess, be more, clear about, the situation with Carol. I just don't wanna feel like I'm stepping on anybody's toes or overstepping boundaries.
You're not.
Has anybody been in touch with Carol?
I have. She called me last night, said she was coming, and then she actually texted me about 10 minutes before the meeting started. As you can see on the agenda, I put on there that she was going to co-chair for me today because I needed to leave. It's my daughter's 17th birthday. She messages me and says that she's not coming. So, I had to ask Mr. Moore and Mr. Kelly if they would, be willing to co-chair for me because she says that she's unable to make it. Had that been the case, I would have made other arrangements, you know what I mean? Because this is important to all of us, and for the chair not to take this seriously is just not, it's not appropriate.
And you had reached out to her in September or October as well.
I have. Sometimes she sends me text messages, or she'll call me and say, Emily, let me know what goes on at the meeting, kind of like, just kind of keep her up to speed of what's going on, and, while I don't mind to do that every so often, I don't feel that I regularly need to do that. It's part of coming to the meetings, right? It's like, people wanting to do public comment, right? And want to rant and rave on Facebook, for example, but don't want to come to a meeting to discuss their concerns that we have a platform just for them for. It's the same kind of idea there. And so it's just, kind of frustrating. It's just frustrating. So that's why I kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because, while she on some level is involved, she's just not involved in the way that she said that she would be involved, and that's to be here. So that's kind of like, that's where I set. So this is just kind of like, things that go through my mind about, what steps need to be taken. And it wasn't, me suggesting an attendance policy was not because the people, I'm not preaching to the choir, because choir shows up. And, to the people that are not here, so it's just, it's definitely frustrating. So I just, I wanted to, mention that, I guess, food for thought, that's something that we'll readdress in the future. This is something that we take seriously, and we have the expectation, and should have the expectation, that other committee members will have the same thing in mind. That's all I'm saying.
I think it's like Jim said, as soon as this rental registry gets off the ground, there'll be a groundswell of interest among landlords. So I think we'll get two interested people at least, if not more. So
Okay.
we'll see what happens with that. That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
I do have one other piece of old business to bring up. I thought we had a good discussion maybe 2 meetings ago about garbage cans and to label them.
Yep.
And that sounds like a small thing, but it's really for a person who has, you know, an offender in their neighborhood, it's a big thing. So I thought that was a very simple thing we could do that would make a big impact for some neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And if I recall, is it the city not the charter, but city codes that have to change, Jim, do you know?
I believe it is in the city code. Is that 187? I can find it real quick.
Well,
I can tell you exactly.
while you do that, I'll continue to
Yeah.
talk. I
Mr.
think,
Moore, can I turn it over to you?
Okay, yeah, and
Okay, great, thank you.
have a nice birthday celebration.
I will, my birthday's Monday, my daughter's.
Oh, my.
Yeah, I'm lucky, right?
bye.
All right, thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
Emily.
Have a good night.
See you on the 23rd. So, so I think this, you know, that could be the first act of this committee, is to recommend to the council that they modify whatever code that is. Would everybody be in agreement to do that?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna open it up, I think that maybe I could be a little bit more prepared for it for next month, but I think we should have a discussion on a couple of other issues that maybe we could tie in with that. You know, and there's a lot going on in the city right now. We don't need a huge undertaking, but there's probably a few small things that could be added that would be beneficial as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really hard to get a grasp on the issue with the downtown garbage. It's just, I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I'm trying to think of what might be the easiest ways to accomplish something without, like I said, getting into too much of an undertaking, but I think we've all agreed here that we'd like to see things cleaned up and look a little bit better. Nobody wants to look at garbage. So maybe I'll try to get a few examples for next month and see what everybody else thinks about maybe some small adjustments that we can make that would be helpful.
Would you be able to report back to us at our next meeting?
Yeah.
on the 23rd?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep saying next month. I mean
Yeah.
next meeting.
That's okay. Let's see. So you might have some other ideas to go along with
Yeah.
labeling.
The labeling, I think, is simple enough, and it would be incredibly helpful in a lot of instances, but there's just a couple of issues downtown that are just, the upper Court Street parking lot, it would be adjacent to Olive Ridley's and Aleka's. There's a strip of property behind there it belongs to the city of Plattsburgh, and that's where everybody stores their garbage, and, you know, I guess no one's ever had an issue with it, but it tends to collect a lot of rubbish and garbage, and there's just not really a good way to deal with it. The only thing that we can do is ask Public Works to remove it, but now they're doing that for free, because there's no way of proving who the garbage belongs to, you know. Plenty of times I've gone through the hassle of looking up the owner of every property that's adjacent to the property, and I send them all a notice, and everybody just comes in and points
Yeah,
at
it's
somebody
not me.
else, so,
Huh.
you know, there's probably a multitude of ways that we could begin to correct some of those issues, but I guess if we can, like I said, the rental registration's coming up, and you guys have been dealing with the budget. There's a lot of big ticket items going, but maybe if we could just dip our feet in the water and kind of think of some small solutions, that would be helpful. If we're gonna get into opening up that law to make that one change, you know?
Yeah. So you'll be back with us
Yeah.
in 2 weeks and tell us more about this. Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
Glad to
that's
see we're
incredibly
continuing to
common.
move.
I think Art will back me up on this, but overflowing garbage cans, containers, it's incredibly common. I know, everybody sees that. And I think it's a great idea, Jim, that, you know, if we mark these things, we'd be able to say, well, you know, you need another container. It's overflowing.
That's another thing. It is, I don't remember right off the top of my head, but in our garbage law, there is something, I don't know if it's the tenant's responsibility or the owner's responsibility, but they do need to provide sufficient storage containers, and if they're labeled, I hadn't even thought about that, you'd be able to say, hey, you know, this is 2 or 3 weeks in a row where you've got overflowing containers, I think you need to add a container there. That's a good point.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I know like the downtown, like, because I try to keep track of that also. And that's the damned if you do and damned if you don't situation is people put their garbage out there and it doesn't get picked up. And we really want, you know, no problem, the Public Works can go pick that up, but as soon as they see Public Works picking it up, everybody starts thinking, well, you know, we can just throw this stuff out here and somebody's gonna pick it up.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we do that as a courtesy, but we don't, you know, we don't wanna start picking up at random addresses for free, which is basically what happens. I know there was a mattress there for quite a while.
You know, I mean, certainly, it'd be easy to just tack on something to the downtown district, another fee that they have to pay, and that'd take care of everything. Every time there's an issue, send Public Works in there, but nobody wants to, you know, people aren't gonna be happy about that, so maybe if there's a way that we can incentivize people to, you know, for whatever reason to say, wouldn't it be better if you had a garbage room inside, or whatever the case may be. If you look at Protection Alley, there's always unclaimed junk and rubbish through there. Because why do I care? This is my mattress, I'll just dump it here. This looks, oh, push it right out the window, you know, it's.
Oh my God.
Jim, I'm sorry, did you say that the dumpsters are behind Aleca's and all the Ripley's, and did you also say the Pepper? And that they're on city property?
Well, I believe that is city property as well, because it's all the parking lot right there. I think screening in some of those instances would go a long way too. Just all those areas where there's multiple, you know, occupancies storing their garbage downtown, with some screening would really help, I think.
Is there any way to explore some sort of cooperative arrangement with the downtown business owners and the city where the city agrees to let them use city property for dumpsters, and then they pay into I don't want to say another assessment district, but some sort of cooperative trash collection program where all the business owners pay into it and they get to put as much garbage as they want to in these locations. They're on city property. Downtown businesses don't have front yards, side yards.
Yeah, I've tried to consider whatever leverage we might have, and then, you know, maybe we could talk to Casella and come up with some cooperative where, okay, these are your customers, but they're storing their cans on city property. That's okay, but how about you collect this trash more than once a week or whatever it's being picked up, more frequently? Something like that, I don't know. There's a lot to explore.
So are you saying Casella's coming into that space currently?
I believe that all of those garbage cans that are stored right there, there's several of them, I believe it's all Casella.
Okay.
I don't think any of them are city, are picked up by the city.
Okay.
I'm not 100% that it's Casella. I think there's at least a couple that are Casella, but there might be multiple private contractors there.
I think Rin picks up some stuff down there.
And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
It's a whole row
Sure.
of dumpsters there, and I imagine they can only be picked up when it's 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and no one's parked there yet, because it's all right up against parking spaces too.
Oh, okay.
So even if there was some sort of privacy structure, all of the dumpsters could be in there, and then the hauler comes in and they have one space where they could roll them out or something like that. Maybe you would, I don't know, I've considered everything. I'm just, like I said, not trying to turn a molehill into
a mountain. But that's all good thinking, and I hope you do that all the time. Jim, I would like to see a list of your concerns and maybe even some possible solutions for us to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a way to be more efficient, and then the benefits certainly outweigh the downside, then.
That garbage co-op idea sounds like that's a pretty good idea, I think. You know,
Downtown, remember, is different than the center city. if you get the people who own the properties in Center City to label their garbage cans, that's a pretty safe thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something we could probably take to the council very soon.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanna tack on some stuff to it, that's okay too. Let's
Okay.
just do it soon.
Okay.
I love the idea of screening for the garbage as well. I mean, just screening in general would certainly help. And it would also help to contain the debris that might be overflowing in those containers.
I mean, is it a lot to ask, do you think, for any of these businesses that are using city property to store their garbage, that we at the very least stipulate that they screen it with something that's approved by
Yeah,
our department, community development, the council, whoever?
I think that's a fair thing to ask. They're using city property. We can ask them to do anything that we want with it. It's our property.
I'm sure most people would prefer to put up screening than pay an extra fee.
Yeah. When you say screening, what do you mean exactly?
Just, any kind of, okay, that's just the parking changes thing, but any kind of development like that, there's usually a requirement that screening be provided, whether it's just a chain link fence with those green little panels through it,
Okay.
or if it's a nicer
Yeah.
treated, painted
Yeah.
wood structure, even just a one fence panel in some instances would be sufficient.
For the
Yeah.
planning board, for site plan review, there's
Mhm.
often a requirement that garbage is screened with usually something that matches the architectural,
Mhm.
that's architecturally sympathetic to the existing main structure, principal structure, so.
I would keep the wildlife out. It should be a good
Yeah.
big plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then, when there is an overflowing garbage can, at least it's less, it's still a concern, but at least it's less of an eyesore.
I do want to point out too that it's not just downtown though, there's a property that I drive by every day on my way to work on Miller Street near the train tracks. They actually just got site plan approval and they were supposed to have screening for their garbage just 2 years ago. And every day I drive by a dumpster and 2 garbage cans that are tipped over in the front yard, right next to the sidewalk, not where it's supposed to be, not screened. So it is not just downtown.
You'll have to
So
send me-
I would just suggest that whatever changes you.
Just send me an email on that.
I've talked to Joe several times.
Does that apply to single-family homes as well, Jim?
Which part?
The screening?
No, I was just thinking about that for just really more or less in the downtown district. I think if somebody was building a new development, they would be required to do so, right?
They would be required to.
So-
The one I'm talking about was required to, they just didn't do it.
Okay.
Don't we have a law that says you can't leave your receptacles in your front yard?
That's correct. Only 24 hours before pickup.
I'm
Over
gonna send you that
on
address.
Couch Street, or Couch and William,
Catch They got them out there again.
62, 64, 62, they've been there all semester.
Okay, I'll go by there tomorrow. I don't think anyone's living there right now.
I think they're at least out of 62, somebody's in 64.
I'd like to encourage everybody here to take down this number. It's 518-324-CITY. 518-324-CITY. And if you call that number, Beth in the mayor's office logs the complaint and sends it on to the proper department. So anytime you see something like that in your neighborhood, if you've got your cell phone with you, then you can call that number. Here, give me,
I thought you'd be calling the building inspector's office.
if that issue you're calling about is a building inspector issue, they'll refer it right to them. I found it to be very effective.
Who would take that call, Mike?
It goes to the mayor's office. Beth Carlin
Okay,
would field that call and get it to the right person. And she's very, very responsive. If you leave your phone number there or an email address with her, she'll get right back to you and let you know. That number in numbers is 518-324-2489. I use it all the time. As I walk around my ward, I see stuff and I call that number. They take care of it. It's very, very helpful. And they're very responsive. So I would say give that a try.
Yeah, that all gets logged, Art, so that, you know, every call that you make goes on a list that place has been reported. If you just send that notice through just an individual or whatever, it gets lost, it isn't recorded on a list of complaints that everybody can see. You know, it can get lost that way, you know, you might have called, you know, a couple times to the building inspector's office, but everyone else doesn't know that there's been a problem there. But when we send it through the mayor's office, it gets saved as a list of problems that you can pull up, you know, 6 months from now, a year from now, and see where, you know, where there might have been problems. It's a good way of doing it.
What about such violations as blocking the sidewalk with a vehicle?
Absolutely. Call it in.
Because I've called the police department so many times and no, they don't react at all.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that.
Well, it would, you know, everybody would see that, and it does go back to the counselors that there's a problem with whatever it is. In that case, parking on the sidewalks, we need to know if that's a major problem. We wouldn't know it other than it was recorded. And Beth always copies us all on every complaint that's sent in through her office, which is great. So everybody knows about it. It isn't one person knows about it and they can forget about, you know, oh yeah, that happened a while ago. Well, it was sent to all the counselors.
That's good information, Mike, thank you.
You're welcome. Give it a try, you know. Next time you're out walking around, if you see garbage cans in the front yard that shouldn't be there, call. That creates work for Jim and his department. That's what they like to do, so. Another nice thing about that is the issue in question may require the work of 2 or 3 departments working in coordination, so Beth takes care of all that too, so that's a real plus. Recommend you try that. We're probably getting far afield here, but one of my pet peeves is, let's see what time it is. Oh, I've got to do something. One of my pet peeves is people parking in driveway, parking on lawns and, you know, front lawn. And before you know it, they got a mud hole in their front of their house, and that's an issue too, I think. I gotta just step out for a second. I'll be right back.
Well, that's something I always wanted to ask about. Is there any requirement, like, I buy this big old building, I put 3 apartments in it or whatever. Is there any requirement for parking there, or is it just?
No, there is, it depends on the occupancy classification, but there is a parking requirement for any kind of, unless it was, a use that was pre-existing non-conforming and it was continued, you know, if somebody else had purchased the property or whatever. But do you have a particular instance?
Yeah, but I really don't want to get into that, but because there's multiple examples of that, and it's, you know, the way the city developed. A lot of larger buildings may have only a single driveway, that, you know, no garage. You can only fit 1 or 2 cars, and then it becomes an apartment building, and next thing you know, all those people are out on the street. And I think that's part of the cause of what Art's talking about. They don't have enough room to park, so they park wherever they can, which may be over the sidewalk,
Yep.
maybe in front of somebody's driveway, whatever. I was just wondering what we had on the books for that.
There are parking requirements for the site plans, and certain uses, however, that's usually for newer builds. I don't even know, I I believe we probably have a permit system that's supposed to regulate a conversion of a building.
It depends when a use changes. So you could have a pre-existing non-conforming condition where you'd be, I guess technically in a way, over-occupied, but then if that use changed. So it's a little bit different for residential, but like for instance, you could have a business occupancy and then change it to something different that would require more parking, but you don't have the parking to provide, so you'd have to apply for a variance for that. In terms of residential, it's based on the number of occupants. So there's certain properties that, and this is another thing that the rental registration might help with. If someone buys a property, but it wasn't a real estate transaction, if someone just paid cash for it, they may not know that they're limited in parking, and they might rent it out to however many kids, and then it's difficult to prove. You understand what I'm saying? You can't, I mean, I guess sometimes you could tell by the number of people on the mailbox, and we've been successful in that way before, but sometimes,
That's a lot of detective work for you.
yeah, it's not the easiest thing to prove.
Yeah, it was something I didn't realize was that common, but I guess it is, because I run into it, is where somebody will buy a building for their children that are attending college. You know, it's all on the up and up, it's all residential, and then when they leave, they turn it into an apartment building or building for college students, and it kind of slips under the radar. Well, the use has changed, but no one knows that, and that's, it happens. I didn't
Yeah.
realize there were so many people that would buy houses for their kids, but it
There's a lot of,
apparently happens.
there's a lot of issues like that this registration is gonna help with that people don't really think about on a daily basis. It's just gonna be a lot easier to uphold a lot of the zoning stuff too, you know? Just knowing, just having a good handle on the owner and who's in there and
But that's again,
number of
only gonna
occupants.
apply to units that have 4 or more units or have more than 500 related individuals living in it today.
Yeah, that's true, but still helped quite a bit.
Not really. The number of, based on the ACS data, the number of units with 5 unrelated individuals living in it is like 3.2% of the rental population. It's a very, very insignificant number. Sorry.
Well, I think, I think we got some really good ideas. We got to follow up for Jim for next meeting. I think maybe we ought to move on to new business, and if not, I know Emily had mentioned that we were going to have a speaker, or someone was going to speak.
Don't think there was a plan for her to speak. I think she was letting the comment period be open in case somebody.
Oh,
wanted to
okay,
speak.
yeah.
I would like to touch base though on our last meeting. I know it's been a while. It was October 14th, so it's been almost 2 months. But our last meeting, we adjourned right after the public comment period and the testimony period that preceded that. And I would love to gauge your responses to that discussion we had with Ms. Lynn at that meeting. To me, it was incredibly informative, knowing about the rates of issues with rental housing in our community. And I just kind of wanted to see what everyone else's thoughts on the committee were for that.
Okay,
If you guys can even remember, I know it's been 2 months.
Which one was this?
I was just
When
going to apologize for
Lynn
not
spoke.
remembering that as too well, but
Or
that
maybe we
was
can.
a month and a half
refresh our
ago.
memories.
And I kind of lost some, I don't know if anybody else remembers well enough, or
Well,
comments?
I promise to do a better job with minutes going forward. I got behind on them there for a couple of our meetings, and I'll get that straightened out.
I mean, I would be happy to invite her to present that again or refresh our memories on that. I know it's been 2 months and we didn't get to discuss it after she spoke last time, so I would be happy to do that again. I know I could use a refresher. It's been 2 months and I actually pay attention to these things in the community, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to forget everything you said.
It's totally not a problem. I give repeat advice all the time. But yeah, if you want, I mean, I'm happy to talk about anything. What I really discussed last time was just the general issues that are facing the city of Plattsburgh. Can anyone hear me if I sit this far away? Okay. You know, again, so the city of Plattsburgh, 66% of our residents are renters. As actually Shalice just mentioned, a very small amount of that actually is represented by 4 units or more. It's a lot of single residence homes, a lot of duplexes that are being rented out. There are a significant amount of, at least through my office, we hear a significant amount of code issues. We have an affordability crisis. Right now, the rental vacancy in the city of Plattsburgh, I believe, is around 2%, which qualifies us as officially in a housing crisis. Anything less than 5% is deemed a housing crisis. Clinton County, I think, in total is that as well. So it's a really big problem for people who are trying to find a place to go, people who end up in situations who need to find another place to go. It's a really classic thing in landlord-tenant law. Just in practice, you know, it's like, well, if you don't like your landlord or whatever, just pick up and move. You can't. If there's only 2% vacancy, there's nowhere to go necessarily. Add to that the rising housing costs, add to that rents are going up, add to that, especially in 2020, the impacts of COVID-19. And we have a genuine crisis that I can tell you within the housing advocacy, we all keep calling it eviction apocalypse is going to come soon. So we're worried about that when that all comes down. So I can expand on any of those issues and any other issues that are facing general landlord-tenant law, how the systems work, anything like that.
I have a question for you. How, that 2% vacancy rate, how is that determined?
So I will say, I get that from census data. Now, how the census puts that together, I could not tell you. I don't know that.
I've heard that term, I've heard that many times, that we have a 2% vacancy rate. And I just wonder how, you know, it must mean if there are 98, or if there's 100 apartments, 98 of them are occupied. But how's that determined?
So again, it goes off of, that specific number is calculated by the census. So how that happens, that part I can't tell you.
Okay.
What I can tell you as a practitioner and dealing with tenants in the community, as well as dealing with other housing advocacy groups who, I'm a lawyer, I don't help people find housing, but I do work with social agencies that try to find people housing. You know, I was just on the phone with the landlord last week. He said for one apartment, he has over 18 people interested in it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a crazy amount of people that just because he put something up, that many people in them. I mean, the city of Plattsburgh is only 19,000 people. You know, there's not that many people here. So it's those type of indications that back up that number in real world experience that the 2% seems accurate.
So that's sort of that's the story on the ground, so to speak. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I can speak anecdotally from experience. The last time I sought an apartment, I spent about 6 to 8 months searching for an apartment that was right for my family before I was able to find one. And that's, you know, looking at the cost of the housing, the location of the housing, the size of the housing, would it fit my family? For a moment, we're looking at 2 bedrooms. We had 2 kids at the time, and an apartment was a third, I think. And we couldn't find 3 bedrooms. And when we did, it was way outside of our affordable range. It's very difficult to find housing. Some of the housing I did find had a host of code issues, which I'm fortunate to be familiar with what code issues are, having worked previously in the code office of the town. But I mean, gaping holes in roofs, gaping where you could see the sky. There was one that was, in my opinion, an illegal conversion of an apartment on Miller Street, but they were renting out as a 3-bedroom. I don't believe there was a window in one of the bedrooms, so it would not count as a bedroom under code, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to have an ability to escape in the event of an emergency. It did not have a bathtub. You know, with 2 young kids, I could not take an apartment without a bathtub. There's just a lot of those issues and that type of housing crisis where you can't find housing when you need it here. And certainly not in the rental market. Maybe the
When
sale.
you finish your presentation, which was excellent, I learned an awful lot at that October meeting. There was a young man that came up and gave us each a list of places that he had rented, and it was really pretty horrifying to see how, as a renter, he was abused. So if there are only 2% of all these properties available, he's caught between a rock and a hard place.
And that's exactly it. To go off of what Shali said, these problems exacerbate the more criteria a person needs to have when they're looking for housing. So families, you can't rent an efficiency, you can't rent a single apartment, you need to have a certain number of bedrooms, you need to have a bathtub, you need to have things like that. If you have disabilities, now you're really limited in what, do you need a first floor, do you need access to an elevator, do you need access to certain things. Public transportation for low income people, you can't be in the far flung reaches, you need to be closer to a bus line or closer to be able to walk, so that's narrowed your scope of where you can even look for apartments. Emotional support animals, or just even people who don't necessarily have an emotional support animal, just love their pets, trying to rent with an animal, incredibly difficult to do. And again, landlords don't need to compromise on that because right now the market's in their favor because they have 18 people looking at every single apartment. And I can say that especially with the COVID-19, because you said about being abused by landlords, we've in my office, we've seen a 700% increase in illegal evictions coming through our office. Now that's not purely the city of Plattsburgh, that's the whole service area that my office sees. But it's a dramatic increase of tenants being illegally ousted, being threatened with being illegally ousted, not knowing the difference. There's a real power imbalance between the landlords and the tenants, which is exacerbated when you have a 2% vacancy, because like I said, it's not just, we'll just pick up and go, because there's nowhere to go.
Another thing, I believe you spoke last time a little bit about retaliation by landlords when tenants speak out against an issue in their apartment. Can you speak to that again at all?
Sure. So yeah, retaliation is a very significant issue. And that was actually recognized by the New York State Legislature in the 2019 law changes. Brief background on that, landlord-tenant law in New York State was largely codified back in 1976. And then 2019, we had a massive change, 74-page bill that changed a lot of that. And retaliation was one of those specific things that made it much broader, much greater protections for tenants in retaliation cases. And that's because it's recognized as such an issue. And a lot of times, what'll happen is tenants complain to the landlord, tenants complain to code, tenants have the audacity to defend themselves in court, and then find themselves on the receiving end of abusive tactics, of scare tactics, harassment. I have tenants that receive upwards of 50 to 100 texts or calls a day from landlords, coming to the door, knocking at all hours of the day, yelling, screaming at them, termination of services, which is an illegal eviction if you turn off water or electric. But we've sometimes had landlords who will turn the water off for 6 hours and then come back and turn it on. And it's very hard to get that window caught by an agency who can get the landlord in trouble. Landlords will, sometimes it's insidious and it'll go through the neighbors, the other people in the building, and the other residents will harass the tenants. So there's a lot of, and also just frivolous lawsuits. I think my record so far is I had one landlord filed 7 evictions against a tenant in 6 months that we got dismissed every single time because there was no basis for the eviction. But that tenant still had to go through that turmoil every single time of not knowing if they'd be evicted. And then just the eviction process, we've learned from New York City, which has the right to counsel. So if you're a tenant in New York City, you get a lawyer, just like you would in a criminal case. Since they've rolled out that program in New York City since about 2016, I think the increased rate of tenants being able to stay is like 89%. Just having a lawyer increased the tenant's likelihood of staying by 89% in their house. So when tenants are going to court without a lawyer, again, that power imbalance is so significant. Plus all of the baggage they're bringing with them and even going and how scared they can be of them, so. That answers your question. Sorry.
I think so. 89%, that's dramatic. So 89%, that would indicate that most of the cases, again, are just no basis.
A lot of times it's no basis or fundamentally flawed. Landlord-tenant law is very technical. It's something where a lot of people think that it's a very simple thing. You know, I have a space, you're gonna live there and you're gonna pay me rent. The premise seems very, very easy, but the intricacies are very significant. And a lot of times you find in court that the landlords didn't follow through with the process. And something that I can say at my office that we try to do, and I think I can speak on behalf of legal services throughout New York State, we try to look at it more holistically. You know, so if a tenant comes to us, it's not just how do we beat this court system. It's like I said, there's nothing that's stopping the landlord from filing again in 2 or 3 weeks. How do we fix the problem so that the tenancy is solved, so that the landlord is happy, so the tenant is happy, so the tenant can stay for a long time. But that's where if you're getting into those retaliation issues, a lot of times my advice to a tenant has to be, we're gonna stall this out until we can find you another place to go. Because this isn't gonna get solved, because this is really a personal retaliation issue. I'm not a counselor, I can't solve that.
In your experience, how long does it take to find them another place to go?
Again, it depends on how many criteria they have to find another place. But if we take, you know, the example of a single healthy person, they just need like a 1-bedroom apartment. Pre-COVID, 4 or 5 months to find another place to go. Because then you also get into affordability. When we talk about the affordability crisis, generally in housing world, your housing should be no more than 30% of your income. That makes it affordable. That's how mortgages are based and things like that's the general number. So if you are over 30%, you are rent burdened. And if it's over 70%, it's officially unaffordable. And I've had tenants who had to escape bad places for a variety of reasons, who've taken new rentals where 80% of their income goes to rent. Especially like residents who have like SSI, Social Security income. I don't know what the most recent increase to SSI is, but it was approximately $850 a month. I mean, there's single units in the city of Plattsburgh that go for $900, so they couldn't even get a 1-bedroom in the city on that, just as an example.
A lot of people in that situation end up in residential hotels, is that true?
Yes, so if you are ousted, whether you're evicted, you're illegally evicted, we have sometimes had to have tenants leave just due to mental health reasons from the harassment. Generally speaking, you can go to the Department of Social Services who will house you, but that housing here, emergency shelter, is almost exclusively in the motels. And we have seen, DSS could speak to that better than I could, but we have seen the stay. I've been in this community for about 7 years. The stay used to be on average, you'd be in temp shelter for maybe 3 to 4 months. Now it's very common that you'll be in temp shelter for upwards to a year before you can find a place to go.
My goodness.
And that includes families. We have entire families living in a 1-bedroom hotel room.
Inefficiency.
Yeah, it's not even. I mean, they don't even have a kitchen. They have a college fridge and a hot plate. You know, so.
How do other communities address these issues? I guess I'm looking for what we could do.
I will say it's a national crisis, so we're not alone in this. There's a lot of people trying to solve this problem. Unfortunately, I'm limited in I can't provide suggestions. That's one of those limitations I was telling Stacy
If you
earlier.
were on the committee, you would be able to provide the suggestions?
Yes, yeah, I would. Or similarly, if any of you had ideas and you would want to know how that would impact the population that I work with, I could comment on that way.
Would expanding the rental registry law to single-family dwellings and duplexes assist that or combat those
Yes.
issues?
Absolutely. Again, in the vast majority of rental units within the city of Plattsburgh do not fall within the rental registry law, especially since Plattsburgh housing is exempt from it. Because most of the housing that would, I think, would be 4 bedrooms would be Plattsburgh housing, which is not a criticism of Plattsburgh housing. I just want to make that very clear. It's not at all. But yes, expanding it to single residences and duplexes would drastically improve that.
Okay, did anyone have any additional new business?
The only thing I'll say is that I'm gonna continue, and I apologize, you probably are all tired of me, you know,
No.
beating a horse, the dead horse, whatever the phrase is. I still think that the rental registry needs to be expanded to single-family dwellings. Somebody reached out to me through my own advocacy in housing, and, you know, told me that sometimes the issue is that there are a limited number of landlords in the community, so there's a specific for economic phrase for it. It's not monopoly, but I think it's oligopoly, when it's a small number of people who control the majority of the housing stock in the community. So in the rental community, you see a lot of it. The same landlord owns 80 to 200 properties throughout the city. So if you complain about them once, let's say 2012, you have an issue with one of their properties and you complain against them. In 2020, when you need another rental property, you have eliminated 200%, or sorry, not 200%, but 200 units of the housing stock from your search, because you're limited in not being able to rent from that landlord again. They've retaliated against you in the past, or you complained against them in the past, and retaliation is such a prevalent issue in housing that's it's a prevalent issue. So the issues of not being able to find suitable alternative housing and needing to rely on a process by which you don't have to complain about your landlord in order to get an inspection, you know, it's so important to the rental community to be able to get an inspection without having to ask for it.
And I would, just to say that there are, and landlords have said not only this to me, but they've said so publicly on Facebook and other groups, that they keep lists of tenants who they don't want to rent to for years. So if they've been evicted, if they've complained, and sometimes landlords will share that. Well, I'm not gonna rent to you because my buddy who you rented from 3 years ago says you're a bad tenant. So that definitely happens. So for the reason I do agree that expanding it to cover all rental properties helps remove that complaining component from tenants to help protect them.
I don't think it needs to be every year, but I do think it should match, you know, the 3-year schedule that's provided elsewhere in statutes. I feel so strongly that needs to be expanded. It's the one defense mechanism that tenants have, is to not have to complain to get an inspection, you know, their unit.
I think to give the council and especially the building inspector's office a chance to work with this new thing that they're doing, which is rental registries, and then let's look at expanding it. I agree with you, Shalice. The problem is probably with, you know, 2-unit buildings or even one single-family homes, more so than multiple units. Although I don't know that for sure, but let us get this implemented, and then we'll talk about expanding it. Okay?
I will hold you to that. Can we
You
set a
do.
date?
Please do, and you remind me every meeting, or even ask the question, have you made any progress on that yet? Let's get it in place. See, we'll hear feedback from Jim and his department on how it's going, and then we'll definitely move on that. I think I agree with you on that.
Thank you.
I don't know how you feel about it, Jeff.
Well, I just want to say that we need to get this initial law on the books, start working it out. And, you know, to expand on it before we've even implemented it is maybe getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I know it's an issue, and I agree with you, it needs to be addressed. But to try to piggyback it on something we haven't even started yet is probably a little bit out of sequence. Let's see how we can see how this works out, and we can definitely talk about other issues. That's really the purpose of this committee, is to come up with ideas and ways that we could implement them. So I'm all for that. That's what we're here for, and I appreciate your input.
I think you're on to something there, because when I think about my own neighborhood and my own ward that I represent, most of them are like duplexes. You know, there aren't that many large apartment buildings. So definitely something we need to do. Let's just take it one step at a time.
Yeah, and as some of these properties, some of these older rental properties just continue to, you know, I mean, over the years, a lot of these buildings are really old and they haven't been maintained. It'd be nice if there was some, you know, new apartments are gonna be built every year. That's just what happens here. It'd be nice if there was a program to rehabilitate some of the older, you know, duplexes and single-family homes and turn them back into, you know, a permanent residence for someone. And, you know, some of the older single-family homes that are being used as a rental that are not in the best shape, that could be updated and brought back to life.
That's an excellent idea.
I think the Community Development Office has some funds that can be used specifically for that, and when I say some funds, I mean, I think it's about 1.2 million, that could potentially be used for housing rehabilitation.
Well, there used to be a lot of programs. I mean, Kenny, who I used to work with, he was a rehabilitation officer in your department, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of programs for properties that were,
They still
in rough
exist, and the
shape.
funds are just sitting there.
oh yeah?
Yeah, they exist and they're sitting there. Just administratively, we need to figure out what the limitations are in order to be able to administer them again.
What are those programs called specifically?
Oh, they're usually CDBG funds.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
CDBG funds, Community Development Block Grant Funds.
okay.
Melina would be able to speak to you about it in greater detail.
Okay,
I believe at some point they're hoping to, in 2021, start looking into reutilizing those funds that have just been sitting idle and are ready to be used.
okay. So those funds could be used to return duplexes back to single-family homes.
Not just that, but in order.
Does the
and
city
rehab-
reserve the right to put stipulations on those when they're awarded?
This is the problem is that we don't know what the restrictions are. Their funds came through over a course of many years through different funding agencies, funding programs, and often they have their own restrictions and limitations in how the funds are able to be distributed or used. And the problem is due to turnover and lost records and et cetera, we just don't know the source of all the funds and what the limitations tied to each source are. So we need to do a little bit of forensic accounting on those funds and before we can really administer them properly.
Yeah, I wonder, can they be applied in such a way where, you know, for a single-family home, the owner-occupied single-family home, you could qualify for this, or if it was a property owner, you could qualify for this if you contribute 200% of what you're getting or something.
I believe it's usually a low interest loan, so it's a way for them to borrow the funds, and it's usually tied to a repayment schedule, and then it's a low interest loan. Usually sometimes are HUD inspection guidelines tied to it. That's, I believe, specifically what Ken did. He did HUD level inspections on the properties to ensure that they were up to standard. I can't say for certain. I don't think any of us up there can. We need help in order to understand what those funds are, and just due to turnover and the different ways and years and times in which they came in, the funds. But they're there, and I'm certain that at least to some level they can be used for this. I'm certain they can be used for rehabilitation. Whether that's just bringing properties up to a better standard or converting them. I don't know about the conversion ideas. Oftentimes they're tied to a goal of expanding housing, particularly affordable housing. Sometimes that's tied to some of them. There's an affordable housing requirement that the unit must be rented at a certain affordable rate. You probably would know what the affordable rate would be, but it's usually tied to HUD data that's released in that year. But converting it from a multiple family dwelling to a single family dwelling would probably be antithetical to.
I was just thinking
The goal
about
of it.
how it could be beneficial to the stuff that we've been talking about, that's all.
In terms of the comprehensive plan and zoning update though, that would probably be a good idea for certain districts where we want to preserve the character of the housing. So in the Court Street, Brinkerhoff district, if we want to preserve the historic character of that district, we should probably in our comprehensive plan include a stipulation that we want that district to maintain a single family housing use instead of multifamily or student housing. That would be a way to limit it, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm the cook in my house.
We need to go. So I guess at this time we could, if there's any public comment, I know you have issues.
I said everything I wanted to, thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess at this point, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. We have plenty of homework to do.
Motion to adjourn.
Shalice, Jim second.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
See, I think if we stay on course with more meetings, I think, you know, we kind of left off somewhere and then a month later trying to pick it back up. I think we'll be more organized if we keep to our schedule.
See you guys all in 2 weeks.
Thanks for attending, everyone.
Yeah.